Okay.
Are you doing middle class Walmart? The exact same thing, but people like it better.
Hey, it's cleaner.
Yeah, you just pay a little bit more at the cash register. All right, so here's the A, B, C, and D. Remember we were doing this last time on looking at who gets helped, who gets hurt. We had deadweight loss of B and D, the tariff revenue. And so the advantage of tariffs is kind of squishing this down. If we lower tariffs, we're starting to squish down these areas. One of the people getting squished, though, is domestic producers, because that's who we originally intended to help. And so the California tomato growers, the California avocado growers, those are the ones that were getting hurt with the NAFTA freeing up in the agricultural area or produce area. And so here again were the numbers about where we left off last time in terms of deadweight loss, and that's just money. Economists look at that as just money sitting on the table that could be back into the economy, back into the system, because deadweight loss just kind of poof, vanishes. Some money gets transferred from one person to the next, but it's not dollar for dollar, and that's an important concept in economics with making a policy change in analyzing deadweight loss. All right, and you can see same is true in other countries, so the United States isn't alone. This was back in the mid-1990s, so some of this has gone the direction of getting better, and so the numbers should be improved. So we look at these numbers, and they're really too big to wrap our brains around for the most part, right? We're kind of like, oh, well, what's a number of jobs saved and the cost to consumers? Oh, well, that seems pretty fair. I don't know, just kind of eyeballing things. So if we start to look at the cost per job saved, it opens up your eyes a little bit differently.
I don't think those people get paid that much a year.
Yeah. So protecting one industry, let's look at agriculture, to the tune of how many jobs were saved. We saved those 6,000 jobs. Now bear in mind, 50 jobs getting lost is going to make the nightly news, right? We're losing our jobs. You can't do this to us. What are we going to do? Oh, you're right. That's bad that we're opening up for trade. We got to protect everybody. We start to not look at the data. That's how many jobs. There's the cost to consumers. $500,000. Per job, yeah. One job, $500,000. This is not just making this up. This is what the economist estimated. This is no kidding. $138,000 per job for the protection. $202,000 for the job. So in many cases, we're better off not doing the tariff, open it up to free trade, and cut a check to these people. Every single person here, just cut a check to them for $50,000, see if they'll take it, and we're ahead. That kind of rocks your boat, right? When you start looking at it that way.
If you're in those industries, it's like, all right, cool.
Yeah.
Every single one of those people could have been retrained at like an Ivy League school for that.
Yeah, that's another way to look at it. Well, we'll let you go to Harvard or Stanford or wherever you want to go to get retrained, and you can kind of write your ticket into your next job. Or, really, the easier thing is just to cut them a check. It's nice and clean. They can choose to go to Harvard with it, or they can go blow it at the casino. I don't care, but here's your money. If you think it's a fair deal, let's shake on it. Let's sign it. Here's the money. And that's just from, a particular year. So let's just cut them a check for that amount for this year. They'll probably take it. We'll have a lot of takers on that deal. And then here to eternity, we won't have that problem. You can see how many dollars ahead we'd be in some of these cases. So we're going to go through some of the arguments in this chapter of why we might want to possibly keep, or the arguments that are made to keep them. All right, so why do we get that gross inefficiency where it's that wasteful? You know, trade policy is grossly inefficient. Why?
Incredibly diverse and complex. And
Okay.
there's so many parts working together. One alter of the engine that starts
Okay, one distortion and you can't track it through. That,
or magnified.
I'd agree with that. Yeah, we're dealing with something much more complex than it looks. That no one person can really figure it out. Even a team of experts wouldn't be able to trace out all of the myriad of effects that are there. So it's pretty complicated. Okay, why else can you imagine that trade policy, designing a policy, would lead to an inefficiency? I'd say that's a good answer. Yeah.
And you're talking about making a very rigid law spec for a specific period of time in a market structure that's changing by the second.
Okay, so changes over time. Part of the complexity issue, right, is that even if you can figure it out now pretty well, it's going to be changing and ever changing. Okay? What else? Think about the policy makers. Mostly lawyers, okay? Politicians, a lot of lawyers. What else can cause some inefficiencies on making sure that the right dollars and the right things and the right policy design and the right tariffs and the right quotas and the right laws and the right restrictions?
Beliefs.
How can it? Okay, yeah, certain.
School do you come from?
Okay, yeah, different
Yeah.
beliefs of the people. That could be a gray area in what they think is correct and what they think it's not. And then what was cronyism?
Basically, favoritism of tax dollars.
Yeah, just looking for favorites, right? Some of these people get a little too chummy with each other, and so that can start to create inefficiencies that even if they know that we could maybe look for a better solution, well, that's my buddy I go fishing with every 6 months or over the summer. So there's a number of different issues. Give that list a quick read. What is the non-transparent job creation program? What would that mean? What do you think that would be? Non-transparent job creation program.
It reveals, or it hides cronyism, hides what's going on. Like, all of a sudden, the trade policy is just out. Well, I mean, yes, you can read Congress or congressional records, but those bills are going to be
Buried in there.
7,000
Yeah.
pages long.
So it's kind of hard to see, of course, is what we're thinking. And when a business creates a job and we know that they're not getting favorites, then what do we pull out from the market system, from kind of the traditional capitalist system? When a job gets created, what else do we believe was created? Think about this one. This is a good one to let soak and settle in here. So when a job gets created in the private market system that's not tainted by favorites or other things, so kind of laissez-faire, hands-off, when a job gets created in that system, what do we know gets created?
Maybe a loss of a job in another.
Possibly, there might have been a trade-off. But if there is a loss in a job of another one, what do we know about the job that did get created?
Better suits consumer needs.
It better suits the consumer needs, so there was value that was created, right? So otherwise it wouldn't have been done. Or there's at least belief that there's an expected value. Maybe it would be another thing if we get into the idea of entrepreneurship, that we believe that people will value the use of that person in this job more. Better yet, if there was just an unemployed person that wasn't working at someplace else and a new person got hired, there's value to society being created somehow. We don't know that for sure if it's through a government program where there was a handout. Because with the handout system, tax money was collected from somewhere, money was taken from somewhere, and given somewhere else. And that's what created the job. So we don't know for sure that there was any value created of the final outcome, the final product. We don't know for sure that that went on with that kind of setup. All right. So given that the cost of tariffs and quotas are high to consumers, why do consumers tolerate them? Let's see. Let me go to Dylan on this one. What do you think? Why do consumers... What's that?
I said, now that I'm reading in the book.
Now that you got this one down, well, go ahead.
Well, it says,
I want to hear your heart, but that's okay if you've already read it and it's already embedded in your brain. Then go for it.
It says ignorance is certainly the case for some goods, but for some tariffs and quotas, the costs have been relatively well publicized.
Okay, so now stop there. Don't read anymore.
Okay.
So given that the cut, because that's not the answer I was really looking for. So now I want to hear from the heart here. So if the cost and tariffs,
I don't have a heart.
if the costs and tariffs are high and we know that they're detrimental, why do consumers tolerate? And what allows in our system consumers to say, yeah, I suppose. Well, a tariff it costs what it costs. So
Supposed to be the voting booth.
what do you think? Why do consumers?
They don't have any, they don't really have a say.
Okay.
So like I don't really have
You're
a
right
say.
in a sense that their say is hard, right? What makes their say, having a say, what makes it difficult?
So diffused, it's hard to collectivize.
Hold on, let me hear Dylan.
Sorry.
I agree with you totally. They don't have as much of a say. So how do the Keystone Pipeline people who want to see oil flowing down from Canada that we just heard about, how do they have a say? What's the mechanism in place so that they have a say? They have lobbyists, right? So they can organize themselves. What about you? When you don't seemingly have as much of a say, why can't you organize?
You have the money to buy a lobbyist?
Right? So we start playing a numbers game where we start doing a little cost-benefit analysis on ourselves. So yes, you're ticked off that you like tomatoes, or I know you didn't like avocados, but tomatoes are all right. So you're kind of ticked off that your tomatoes are $2.39 instead of $2.05. Is that enough emotion, enough money at stake for you to collectively start a campaign to get all tomato consumers together and collect maybe $1 a person? Man, if we just had 50,000 people and we had $1 a person, I, Dylan, will take this to the steps of the Capitol. Is that going to happen?
No.
No, hell no, right? That doesn't even make any sense. So the problem with our system is that the say that you're talking about, there is, in theory, a mechanism at play that the consumers could fight back, but it's not in their rational self-interest to do so. It doesn't make sense rationally. So as an economist, I'd say, don't do it. If the expected cost of doing an action are greater than the expected benefit, don't do it. Screw it, right? So it's completely rational for people to tolerate those costs. So one of the early economists from the 1960s, Mancur Olson, was one of the first ones to write on this. And this was his book, The Logic of Collective Action. And he kind of figured that one out. Like, even if we know that we're getting screwed, we still don't have any real incentive to try to fight back for it. And we'll just let it slide. And the special interest groups will have a vested interest in it to where the expected benefit of them lobbying the politician makes perfect, profitable sense. And so they do it. And so then we get this inefficiency as a result of just good old rational self-interest. It's really a market failure. It's a situation where the absolutely free market, under those set of rules, under, let's say, a democratic process where there's a voting and we change the policy, that we get an inefficient solution. Taylor?
Does the elasticity of the good have anything to do with it?
It can.
'Cause
Like, what were you thinking?
gas,
Okay.
and there's not a huge movement against gas. I mean, I guess the electric cars coming up, but
Right.
other than that, I mean, it's still something that we need to get from point A to point B in our vehicles, so we tolerate higher prices on it.
Right, right. And so the bigger bite it is, the bigger bark we might start to have. I mean, if gas prices rose to $8 a gallon, would you guys be willing to sign a few bills and maybe to march up? Yes. So, and gasoline, especially if you're a lower income individual,
Yeah.
how much of a fraction of your income does gasoline make up? Quite a bit, right? A lot more than a person making. So if we take a person making $100,000 a year versus a person making $30,000 a year, their gas consumption is likely similar, right? They're both commuting to work. One's commuting back and forth to a $10 an hour job. The other one's commuting back and forth to a $40 an hour job. But their gasoline cost is the same. And so more of us would start to have an incentive to fight if it makes up a larger fraction of our income. Okay, anything else on that?
I think you just see people stop driving. I think you would find that.
Yeah, at $8, I agree with you. I mean, you'd start to seek substitutes.
Right.
Carpooling,
Motor scooter.
mass transit, motor scooter.
Bicycle.
Actually, I just saw something. You guys ever watch the History Channel, like the Pawn Star type stuff? They had a scooter that came in from 1969, some Italian scooter or whatever, and that's when gasoline prices were up and scooter sales went up big time. So you get that 50 miles to the gallon.
Yes.
Of course, now we're making cars that can do 50 miles to the gallon with a little electric assist.
So I live in hybrids.
All right, give this a read here.
Yeah.
So food stamps got more of the big headlines here the last month when the new food bill got passed. But this is what they were tackling in large part were the ag subsidies. So
Why were the food stamps even really related to it? It seemed like it was a combination of two fairly unrelated fields.
I don't know if this is basically they were all put into place originally in the same platform, probably for whatever reason was back in the 1950s, I think it was, or 60s when some of that started to go. And then it's stayed into place, so when they debate that particular change, they had to debate it all. That's a lousy answer to, that's about all I know. That somehow it's sticky, that the way laws are passed, it's all falls under some umbrella of a package. And so if it's up for change, then everything in the package needs to be discussed. And it's probably, I'm guessing it must be more headache to separate it out. I suppose you could attempt to pull food stamps and this out of the picture, but that would take another year or something to get it through. I don't know.
Right.
I don't know what the process is. I'm not too good on the political science
that actually
front.
kind of makes some sense. It just, whenever, if they weren't related whatsoever, it seemed like two completely different industries
Yeah.
that they were pulling together.
And it would seem perfectly logical to us outsiders looking in to say, well, why are we talking about those two topics together? And hopefully, maybe it has something to do with our Constitution, that would actually make it harder for things to be very easy at people's discretion. The fact that it causes debate of the topic. Again, not being political science, I'm hoping that there's some good foundation as to why we talk about it. But it sure does look stupid on the outside, doesn't it, when we hear some of those headlines come across. Okay, so this starts to feed our background to some of the real world stuff. Here's our subsidy situation, to start to put it into perspective. So ag subsidies, millions of dollars, so 35,000 million, or 32,000 million. It's got some billions involved, right? So we're talking some pretty good size numbers here as a percentage of farm receipts. So 10% of the sales.
So is that just literally a check from the government to your industry or your business?
More or less.
Specifically?
More or less. A lot of them are direct subsidies to the production of it. Yeah. So sales, kind of think about GDP, that's the fraction of it. Look at Japan, 45%. All right. So what is US GDP? 15 trillion. How many people live on our island? 30 million, 300 million, 300 billion? 300, I think that's a little heavy. 375 what? Thousand, million, billion?
I did a project.
It's over 300 million.
It's over 300 million, yeah. So around, I don't know what the exact number is. For a couple, 30 years ago, it was at 307 or something, and I don't think it's up to 370 something now.
Maybe that
But
was a total of something.
yeah,
I did a project. We
could
did
have been a
project.
combo. So even here, kind of thinking about those numbers with ag subsidies, $100 per person. Remember the huge numbers that we had per job? So now take the whole population, $100 per person. If we just take the entire United States population, just to try to put some of that into perspective. All right, the labor argument. Protection must be used against imports from countries where wages are much lower. We can't have cheap labor ruining our jobs. So what's the rebuttal to that?
Society's made better off.
Okay.
Trade.
Okay. And why? I'm with you, you're right, but I want to think a little bit, add a little more detail to that.
Wider diversity of products.
Okay.
And forces the labor force to move into sectors that are actually competitive.
There you go, I like that. So we start thinking about the labor changes, right? From emerging industries to declining industries, right? So we can start to leverage whatever we have a comparative advantage in. So we start to see a shift. The infant industry. Developing countries have nascent industries that must be protected against competition from industrial, imperialist countries. What's the problem with that argument? The infant industry. So the idea is we kind of nurse along our little baby. Our little baby will be competitive on the world market someday, so we're going to protect our little baby. What's wrong with that argument, do you think?
Throws up a false sense of reality.
Okay. Gene, let me hear from you. We haven't heard from you. What do you think about that infant industry argument?
It could become dependent on the help.
Okay. So it kind of comes a point where when do we take the baby off its bottle, right? When do we take the binky away? You know, Because the baby's going to cry when you take the bottle away. The baby's going to cry. You know, when do we get to that point? Because if the industry has grown up around the protection, right, and it's grown because it's been fed that, then it's going to be painful when the help has been taken away. So these would be our positive agglomeration stuff. This is kind of our spatial stuff. It can be hard to measure. Easy to argue maybe on Capitol Hill, but hard to prove. Then there's the national security argument. Certain industries must be protected in order to guard against national security. So national security argument to trade. We don't want the NSA to have too much information, do we? So national security.
So that's saying we don't want to import goods that are threatening our national security?
Yeah, we don't want to import goods that would compete with our domestic producers, because what if we got to go to war and we need production of that? So if we follow the full specialization thing and we get rid of GM and all of a sudden we're not making cars, all we do is import cars to the United States, and then we go to World War III, like, we need cars right now, we need to build tanks. Well, what do you mean? We gave that up years ago. Whoops. That's the national security argument.
It's basically the argument behind why we need to have completely isolated energy, because we're in the war, or we're in the Middle East war.
Yeah, yep, it is similar with energy too. So what's wrong with that argument? What can anybody punch some holes in that one? I'll talk about the culture thing here in a little bit, but
Well, for one, it's coming off of an assumption of basically we're completely shutting down all global trade within an instant, which we have a lot of different players involved.
yeah, so we got a lot of different trading partners. So that's one hole to punch right away, is that if it went to World War III, it's not us against the world, likely, right? There's a couple bad guys over here, and there might be alliances. What's that?
Well, there's the chance where we go crazy and we are the bad guy.
Could be, and everybody's against us, but
That's plausible.
I think that's, I don't know about plausible. That sounds a little conspiracy theory-ish to me. Because if you start to look at the trade lines and how we have intra-industry trade, remember too, where we trade a car for a car, essentially. So we have a lot of our international trade is industry for industry, and so we're really pretty well diversified in a number of different things. So the reason I got this one down here is, what about us trading Britney Spears for some plastic toys from China? How does that trade go?
Well, I like Brady. I don't want to do.
We're trading old washed up pop stars for new toys? Okay.
What kind of toys?
So does China have a legitimate argument to keep Britney out?
I mean, if they want to keep, I mean, I could see you actually want to keep it. It actually makes logical sense.
Or lately, you guys have Justin Bieber, yeah.
He is, let's say, he's an export from Canada that we do not want.
He's an import from. We have him here, so we've talked about getting him out of here for corrupting our people and being a danger. He's a danger to the common good.
Blake Griffin, national hero.
Yeah, he is.
So these are some issues that, especially some of the communist countries or cultural, they don't want westernization, right? They don't want what we do here, and probably for good reason in some cases. They might not want our television shows and our way of life. So
They have some really crappy. I mean, I
Do-
don't want keeping up with the Kardashians. I can't really fault anyone else for not wanting.
yeah,
Because that's an oxymoron.
it's
You can't
tough.
keep up with the Kardashians. They're doing too much.
We hide, we stand behind free speech, right? We're Americans, we stand behind free speech, but it doesn't mean that other countries have to fall in line with
Keeping up with
thinking
Kardashians.
our Americans that that's the type of speech that they want. So that is potentially an argument along the lines of national security, that they might not want to harm their culture.
Studying the Kardashians.
All right. Retaliation. Another country's trade barriers must be countered with trade barriers. What's wrong with that argument for trade, for barriers?
Well, first off, he hit me first. Didn't work in first grade. I don't think it works for national policy.
Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, right? That's somewhere in the Bible, I think. So,
Yeah, everyone becomes individuals.
what's the retaliation? What do you think is the problem longer term with retaliation?
It just keeps on going.
Kind of go back and forth. Yeah, you're in. When we think dynamically again about it, we might get in this little war and it escalates up, and nobody wins. All right.
That's the name of this game.
So give this one a read. The political world sometimes heads a different direction than the rational economist world. Here's some real world stuff. So this is how the U.S. has gotten involved in trade restrictions over time. We'll pick up there next time and get into those in a little more detail. So we're almost done with this chapter. Homework is posted for 5 and 6 and